Hi, this is David Orlofsky, and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Whether you're watching with our friends over at Torah Anytime, or wherever you watch or listen to your podcast, as always, we're happy to have you along for the experience. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, assuming that applies to whatever forum you're using. And sponsor for this episode, the show must go on. What can I say? Doesn't that say it all? Sponsored as a schus for Zivig Hagun at the right time for the donor and for all of those in Klal Yisrael who are looking for a shidduch. Well, too bad you didn't give your name, because anyone who sponsors the Rabbi Orlofsky Show already has a large following of admirers, and I don't see any reason why that shouldn't be able to lead to matrimony, because basically we should breed among ourselves. Sometimes it's kedai to bring in an outsider just to be able to expand the audience, but certainly, Rabbi Orlofsky crazies are meant to stay together. And okay, I want to do something that I have been I don't want to say promising, but I have been indicating I would like to do for a very long time. And I don't know how many people even remember that I spoke about this. I know that's almost foolish to say to some people, because, I sit down with certain people and they start quoting me every line that I have ever said. I just met somebody the other day who happened to hear one of the Rabbi Orlofsky Show episodes and went back, as people often do, 6 years ago, and start listening to the entire thing for hours and hours and hours. And I meet people who say, I listened to every show several times. So, they know more about what I said than what I said. I don't always remember. People say, why do you laugh at your own joke? I said, I forgot that I ever told it before. I'm making it up all new. That's one of the great things about getting old, is you keep meeting new people, and sometimes it's family members, because your memory is just completely shot, So that's it. I'm one step away from Joe Biden. But so I'm sure those people will remember that I've mentioned this more than once. I'm sure they can cite me the actual reference, but reminds me of a story of, there was a impressionist by the name of Rich Little, very popular, and he used to do impersonations. And he said one time he was on a set and he sees John Wayne, and John Wayne says to him, Little, come over here. So when John Wayne tells you to come over, you come over. And he says, yes, sir, Mr. Wayne. He goes, I forgot how I do my walk. Show it to me again. Which is ironic, because here's another bit of trivia for you. A bunch of musicians got together to record a song to raise money for hunger in Africa called We Are the World. This was a major thing. They brought all the people who were making a lot of money at the time. I don't know exactly how they chose who they were going to have and what the conditions were. I know that John Denver was very upset because he had been working for real for years, working on world hunger, and they didn't invite him, and he was a pretty popular guy at the time. But, it didn't, it wasn't as successful as, not everybody got involved, but it was a very successful song, you know what I mean? So they gathered together various music stars at the time, and they brought out of retirement Bob Dylan, who at this point was pretty old, right? Robert Zimmerman is his real name. He became Bob Dylan, a Jewish guy. Anyway, he had a very distinctive voice. I know this because my brother used to play Bob Dylan on his stereo, his records, stereos I was growing up, and he would practice the harmonica along to his music. And I would lie in my bed with a wet washcloth on my eyes and pray for death. Because I used to do an impersonation for my wife, and she was sure that nobody actually goes that way until I finally was someplace where we found an old Bob Dylan record, and I put it on. She says, I can't believe it. How did this guy ever manage, you know? 'Cause I would not feel so alone. Everybody must get stoned. Dun, 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 dun. Well, you're walking through the and this is how he would sing with this kind of whine, you know? I remember there was a song that I had heard on the radio once, sung by some group called Quinn the Eskimo, which I thought was, you know, pretty song. When Quinn the Eskimo gets here, everybody's gonna jump for joy. Come on, without, come on. I thought, oh, that's a pretty catchy tune. So my brother says to me, oh, it's Bob Dylan. I said, no, it's not. He goes, here. And he plays the original. Come on, without, come on, within. You've not seen nothing like the mighty Quinn. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm glad they remade it. But he had this whiny. Anyway, so he comes there for, you know, this is We Are the World, and he goes to sing his line, and he's singing it like a regular person, and they say to him, no, do it like Bob Dylan. He goes, what do you mean? I am Bob Dylan. He goes, no. And Lionel Richie has to teach him how to sing like Bob Dylan, you know, so he was finally able to do enough of an impersonation of what he sounded like when he was younger to do it. So I have people who remind me constantly of things that I said that I have no recollection. And that's why I always enjoy listening to my old shiurim, because I did some of the ones that I give all the time. Okay, I know, but sometimes I used to give every other Motzi Shabbos for 25 years shiur, and I don't remember all of them. And then I'm listening to one of my old shiurim, and I set up all these questions. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's brilliant. I have no idea what the answer is. And then I hear myself give the answer, and I say, wow, that's such a great answer. I can't believe it. So teach me my walk. I forgot how it goes. So I know there are some people who are very good at following everything I've ever said and ever done. So to them, this will not be a surprise. But I have a good friend in Passaic, and not just a good friend personally, but a good friend of the show. You know, there are certain people who see the show as a vehicle for goodness and righteousness in the world, and they try to support it any way they can. So a wonderful fellow, Ari Edelman, and he had me over I slept over his house, and in my room, it was like they had a sign, welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky show, the kids put up, you know. Anyway, at the time, his son, Shlomo Zalman, used to say to me all the time, you did a whole series on how to choose a seminary. Can't you do something for boys on how to choose a yeshiva? And I said, yeah, it's a great idea. I'm definitely going to do it. And that was, 5 years ago? But nothing ever disappears. It rattles around in here until it starts to annoy you. Yeah. My brother, on his 25th wedding anniversary, was speaking about his wife, and he mentioned, you know, how it says in Eishes Chayil, you know, more precious than pearls. And he says, how do you get a pearl? He says, a piece of sand gets into an oyster, and it starts to irritate the oyster until it releases something beautiful to be able to cover it up, so that's how you get a pearl. You get a pearl because there's something that's itching away at you, bothering you, you know. So then he introduced me, and I said, I didn't follow that exactly, but as far as I understand, his wife irritated him until he bought her pearls. But the truth is that little kernel sits there, and it rattles around until it finally turns into a pearl. That's the idea. So this is a pearl that has been focusing for a long time. Now, I think I just answered the question that somebody asked me. They said, every now and then in the show, you seem to look away. What are you looking at? I said, well, I'm sure I'm turning to my producer. But then I realized, no, I'm looking over here. That's what the guy says. You're looking over here and the producer's not there. I was like, you're right. That's because, I'll give a little background to this. I was being imitated once in the Purim play, and impersonations in Purim plays are one of the most important ways of getting to get insight into yourself that you would otherwise never get, because people see you from a perspective that you don't see. Anyway, this guy was doing me, giving a shiur, and he's laughing, he's telling jokes, and all of a sudden he stops and he goes like this. And everybody laughs. And then he goes back to the shiur and he does it again. And I was like, what is he talking about? I don't do that. He goes, Rebbe, you do it all the time. I said, no, I don't. He says, we'll point it out next time. Sure enough, I was giving a shiur, and they said, there, you just did it. I said, oh, I see. That's because I always try to be gecheshbend about whether or not what I'm saying is a humorous observation in order to bring across the point that I'm doing, or if it's just leitzanis. So when I'm in the middle of a routine or something, I stop at some point and think, is that enough? Should I go for another couple of minutes, or did I make my point already? So I guess sometimes when I'm in the middle of talking and I'm trying to remember something or think something, my go-to is to look off to the left and slightly above to remember it. So I'm conscious of that now. So whoever asked me that question. Also, I don't know who you are. Oh my gosh. But I mentioned that I think just in one of my shiurim that I couldn't find any ranzoni lasagna noodles. I don't know how I was going to make Shavuos, because I always make lasagna, and the only good lasagna noodles are ranzoni that I've been able to find. I'm sure there are others, but those are my go-to. And I said there were none there. There were only the Israeli ones, which are basically like these rectangular little boards. They're not like lasagna noodles, Anyway, I just mentioned this in passing. I then gave my lasagna recipe, of course. But somebody comes in and says there was a bag hanging on the doorknob to the house, and there was a bag with ranzoni lasagna noodles from America. I don't know who you are, but may the Lord bless you and keep you. We had Shavuos because of you. You saved the holiday. Otherwise, it would have been how the Grinch stole Shavuos. And somebody came and just brought me lasagna noodles and just left it on my door. I just can't believe it. By the way, I'm really looking for a Lexus. I just thought I'd throw that out there. I'm just kidding. I have a 10-year-old Honda. I couldn't be happier. Anyway, so... But the point is that whoever brought those lasagna noodles, thank you so much, But I decided that I'm going to start this series on how boys choose a yeshiva. Now, I don't have an outline. I didn't plan this out. Sometimes when I do a series, I really sit down beforehand and I write what, when I talked about the dating and marriage series, I had more or less a theme that I wanted to talk about on each episode. I haven't worked this out. I've never, full disclosure, I've never talked about this before. This is something new, which is always enjoyable because, I have certain people who sometimes come and join the studio audience. And one time a guy was there and he says, you didn't say one thing I haven't heard before. All right. Mildly disconcerting, but I haven't really talked about this before. I'm sure some of the ideas I have, but this particular topic I've never dealt with. So this is uncharted territory for me. And what can I tell you? I will, if having a podcast has taught me one thing, it's that I can talk for hundreds of hours without any preparation. And so that's why I was just recently at my niece's Shabbos Sheva Brachos, and my brother-in-law says to me, "I forgot to ask you to speak. Can you speak?" And I said, "I only do one thing. I better be able to do that. If you become a plumber and you don't know how to clean out a toilet. You really should find another profession. All I know how to do is talk, so I better be able to talk. Not that there are people who require preparation. The first time I went with my kids to visit Pesach Kron, one of my kids said, I hear that you have a whole system when you prepare a drasha. So he says, yeah, of course, you know, and he brings out a file cabinet with index cards. For those of you who remember index cards, these 3x5 paper things. And all of his stories are on index cards, you know, and what he does when he prepares his drasha is he writes the outline, and he wants to tell a particular story or a vart. He puts a number on the index card and a number on his notes, so he knows to refer to that index card to be able to give across the story. And they say, wow, that's amazing. He says, well, doesn't your father have outlines? He goes, no, he just talks. He says, well, doesn't he forget things? Yeah, all the time. Sometimes he sets up a whole shiur with a whole bunch of questions and forgets to answer them at the end of the shiur. And people come and say, you never answered the question. I was like, oh, can we get everyone back together? One of the joys of ADD. But I find that's one of the reasons that a lot of people find me engaging, since a lot of people are suffering from ADD today. We all just go off in different directions together. So I told this already, that when I used to teach in Or Sameach, so there was one person whose job it was to jot down when I would go on a tangent. That was his job, because I would go from tangent to tangent to tangent to tangent, and I would say, how did we get here? And no one could find their way back. I was like Hansel and Gretel, and the birds had eaten all the breadcrumbs. I had no way to find my way back, you know? So he would say, no, Moshe Rabbeinu on the rock, shkoyach. And I would go back. So yeah, a little sense of free association. So let's get started. There is a dramatic difference between a girl choosing to go to seminary and a boy choosing to go to yeshiva. And that's the following. A boy has a chiyuv of Talmud Torah, a girl does not. So that theoretically, a girl who's had a really good high school education should have enough chinuch background to be able to carry her on from there. There are girls who either want more or just want to be in Eretz Yisrael because they have such a love for Eretz Yisrael. That was once upon a time, you know, when there were only a few seminaries in Eretz Yisrael, catering to that small cadre of girls who wanted to continue learning Torah on a higher level and also wanted to be in Eretz Yisrael. And when you came in the good old days to a seminary in Eretz Yisrael, they did not give you creature comforts. You got the regular, what they call sachnut beds. Those are the little metal frame, you know, about yay high with the wooden board and a little, you know, sponge mattress. And we gave you the horse blanket and the pillow that has gone through various iterations over the years and have all the stains to show it. And, you know, the food was somewhat sparse and it was very simple. People didn't go out to eat. People didn't, you know, people came to enjoy the Eretz Yisrael experience. And now it's become de rigueur to go to Eretz Yisrael. And people go out, girls pass on to their friends a book of chavaya, of fun experiences. You know, you want to go to Tzfas, here's who you can call. You want to spend a Shabbos with a blind couple, here's who you call. You want to be in the old... And it's just different experiences that you can have. And of course, a lot of time is spent going out to eat and other kind of things like this. There are seminaries that are specifically made for girls who do not want an intellectual experience. Now, granted, there is an inspiration that one can get from seminary as well, and it could be girls are going there to become inspired, and that's but all of that is more or less seen as an extra. There are certain people who need a year in Eretz Yisrael. There are certain people who want a year in Eretz Yisrael, but most people go because most people do what most people do because that's what most people do, right? And that's just how people make decisions. I'm going to Eretz Yisrael because everyone goes to Eretz Yisrael. I've had girls from different seminaries over at my house, and I said, "How did you pick this seminary?" Most of the time, they can't give me any answer. They can't tell me why I chose this seminary over any other seminary. It's just that's where I got into, or that's where my friends were going, etc. It wasn't a focus of I want to go here or I want to go there and accomplish this and accomplish that. So okay. So if you've got the money and you don't have any other better uses for it, you want to go to Eretz Yisrael and go out to eat and hang out and do all those kind of things. Okay. A lot of worse things to do with your time and your money. So, okay. But there's not a chiyuv of Talmud Torah. If it's for chizik, okay, you could argue there's a chiyuv for chizik. There are certain seminaries where they say we want to give the girls high-level Torah classes so that when they go off to university and they study in university, they'll take Torah as seriously as they do their secular studies and understand that there's a tremendous amount of depth to it as well. So, okay. But there's not a chiyuv. A person wants to, a person can. And so therefore, the considerations that go into choosing a seminary is different than a boy choosing yeshiva, because a boy has a mitzvah of Talmud Torah. Now, I remember when I was teaching, I was a young man who had to fight his parents very much to go to yeshiva, because his parents said, you already had a yeshiva high school education. That's enough. So he says, what do I tell my father? So, actually it was after 1 year. He gave him 1 year. He wanted to come back for a second year. And he says, no, 1 year is definitely enough. So I said, okay, then you only have to go for 1 year of university. Because if 1 year, I assume they gave you a secular education in high school. So you only need 1 year of college, right? No, you need 4 years of college because there's more to learn and not by Torah. It's different. There's an obligation to learn. Now, there are certain people who say, I'm not cut out for learning. Sometimes they're right. They're right. The famous story with the Netziv, where the Netziv apparently did not have such a good head. And he overheard his parents saying, listen, we don't have the money to pay for a malamed for this kid. He's just not smart enough, Let him learn a profession or open a store and, go on with his life. So he heard this and he pushed himself until he became the Netziv. So after he wrote one of his Svarim, which he wrote many, he told the story over. And he says, imagine that I didn't push myself so hard. So the end of my life, I would have gotten up to Shemayim. Now, the way I heard the story is he would have been a kreima, would have been a shopkeeper. Somebody else said, he says, I would have been a shoemaker. I've heard different versions of the story. And he says, Kosh Baruch Hu would say to me, so what'd you do with your life? He says, well, I davened 3 times a day, and I was kovei itim. I always had a seder every day. I raised my children to go and learn Torah, and then married them off and gave them good jobs. And I was a good husband. I ran my business with honesty. He says, that's it? He says, where are all the Svarim you were supposed to have written? The reason I say shoemaker is because my brother-in-law of Nachum Gans, when he was in Brisk, he says, Avram Yeshua told over the story. He says there are going to be certain mechaber svarim, people who've written svarim, that when they get up to Shemayim, Hashem will say, this is it? Where were all the shoes you were supposed to make? So yeah, there's an argument to be made that not everybody's supposed to be in learning. I told this story years ago that a fellow died and he had a big box of ksavim and he said, I want them to be buried with me. So the family came to Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld and said, listen, maybe there's Torah here for Klal Yisrael that we should hold on to and we should save. So he says, all right, we'll take out one piece, we'll learn it, and we'll see. So he takes out one piece, and it was a question of Parshas Vayetze, of Yaakov and the Malachim, and says, Yaakov sees the Malachim going up and down the ladders. So he says, why were they climbing a ladder? They have wings, they could have flown. He says, must be that they were young Malachim and they hadn't grown their wings yet. So Yosef Chaim said, it's no problem, you can bury it. So, right? I don't know who said the original adage, but not everything that you think should be said, not everything you say should be written, not everything you write should be published. Yeah. So apparently there wasn't anything left over here that was considered important enough to hold on to. But there are definitely people who maybe they don't have a head for learning. Maybe they do. Sometimes you meet a boy who says, yeah, I'm not going to go to yeshiva. I don't have a head for learning Gemara. I said, well, what are you going to do? He said, I'm going to go to law school. I said, law school you can handle, but you can't handle Gemara? Why? Because it's too legalese for you? People have to be honest with themselves. So what I tell people is the following. There's a stira in Parshas Naso and Parshas Ba'aloischa. It says the Leviim begin their avoda at 30, and in Ba'aloischa it says it begins at 25. So, is it 25 or is it 30? So Rashi says at 25 we bring him in to see if he can learn the avoda. And we give him 5 years, and after 5 years, if he doesn't see a siman bracha, so then he doesn't have what it takes. So I say the same thing. If you give 5 years in yeshiva and then you see Itaka can't make it, okay, so go off and do whatever you want. I learned in Chavetz Chaim, the Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Henach, would call over guys after certain period of time, I don't know if it was 5 years, I don't know exactly, and say, listen, you're a very fine person, but you don't have what it takes to make it in learning. Go to college, learn a profession, get a job, go out to work, but this is not for you. You don't have what it takes. And, okay, but you have to first give it a real solid chance. Somebody contacted me and said that they were writing a book on dyslexia. And he has evidence that there were certain Gedolei Torah who suffered from dyslexia. He has evidence. He says, can I quote you in the book? Because to the best of my knowledge, you're the only Rav who ever admitted he had dyslexia. So, okay. But between the dyslexia, the ADD, all of my other different difficulties, I was not successful in yeshiva. I wasn't. And I remember after 3 years, I went to Rav Henach and I said, I'm not making it. I really tried. Everybody else that I went to said, you're not trying hard enough. No one knew about learning disabilities. I said, you're not trying hard enough. You don't care enough. If you cared, you would do it. You're lazy. You're this. You're not trying, So I went to Rav Henach and I told him the whole story, expecting to get some chizuk, go back to the base medrash and hit your head against the Gemara again. And he looked at me and he says, wow, I could never spend 3 years doing something that I didn't enjoy and wasn't successful at. You must have an unbelievable drive. Psh, like that made me feel like $1 million. Brought me back. We didn't know what self-esteem was back then. We didn't have a word for it, but suddenly returned me myself. And so he says, but you should go into Habatzis Torah, do something because you're a talented guy. And I stumbled into NCSY and suddenly found out I had a talent. And after years, I went back to the Beis Medrash, 9 years, 10 years, went back to the Beis Medrash, and I had the confidence and I developed enough ability to try to overcome my learning disabilities. And Baruch Hashem, I was definitely mildly successful, you know. But I understand that a person who stays in yeshiva and isn't producing, it isn't getting anywhere, okay. But a person has to first give themselves a fighting chance. And you have to be realistic. You have to be realistic. You have to know who you are and what you are, what you're capable of and what you're not capable of. For years, I used to quote the line from Cool Hand Luke until one of my avid listeners wrote and said it was really from Dirty Harry. Okay, what am I going to do? Yeah, a man's got to know his limitations. So I didn't know my limitations because everyone kept telling me how smart I was. I didn't know there was something wrong with me, that I couldn't see the words, and that I started reversing. I was just learning with somebody, and I did it just now. I reversed I'm 65 years old, and I still am reversing letters and stuff. And I just didn't know. So I had to be able to go and solve it for myself. But, I'm going to share with you now a dirty secret. And it's, I don't even know if it's such a secret, but it's a definite reality. The reality is that you have a 2-year window to learn how to make a laning on a piece of Gemara. It's only 2 years. Depending when they start Gemara, it's from 4th to 6th grade or from 5th to 7th grade. That's it. After that, they expect you to know already. And if you turn around, it's like, imagine in 5th grade, you suddenly show up and you say, listen, I can't read Hebrew. And everyone's like, what? You can't read Hebrew? How's that possible? Same thing with the laning. Certainly by 7th grade, the assumption is you already know how to make a laning. Yeah. And if you didn't pick it up at that point, you're going to bluff in learning for the rest of your life. And I've seen it time after time after time. So what do? You do a trick like I did. You get a chavrusa who knows how to make a laning, but isn't as smart as you. So you can wow them with your lumdus and your intellect, etc. Even though you don't have the skills. I went to Chavetz Chaim in 1975 in Eretz Yisrael, and I was supposed to be in the Mechina Shir for a year. And my Rebbe, Moshe Dov Harris, he moved me up after a month. And he says, I can't keep him here because he's mechaven to every Rebbe Kiva Eger. And I know he's mechaven to it because he can't read it, because the guy can't read. I can't keep him here because he's just too smart, So they moved me up into the next year, and I couldn't read. But I'd get a chavrusa who could read, and then I would play around. And one time my Rebbe just said to me, because you only got here because of mental gymnastics, but you don't really have the skills necessary to sit and learn. And I knew that, but I didn't know what to do because I didn't know how to solve this problem. And nobody there knew about the learning disabilities to be able to help me. So I was kind of stuck. So the amazing thing I found is there are lots of guys in Yeshiva Gedola, sometimes in higher levels, who are sitting there doing lumdis and svaras, but don't know how to read. And that's why when I sat down, and I remember there's a fellow who's a Rosh Kollel, and I was speaking once about my ADD and my dyslexia, and he comes over to me, making sure nobody can hear, and he says, you're lucky. The kids with ADD, they sat him in the back of the class, and you just spaced out. He says, I had ADHD. We were the ones bouncing off the wall. We were the ones who got beaten. So consider yourself lucky that you had the ADD instead of the ADHD. Yeah. And that's true. Yeah. So for whatever reason, so he said, but I'll tell you this much. I had to work much harder. I have to read that Rashba 40 times before I can understand what he's saying. But then when I speak to the kollel, nobody can argue with me because I've seen this Rashba 40 times. They've only had to see it once or twice because they know how to read. I thought that's a brilliant observation. And so I have to spend an enormous amount of time going over it in order to chop what it's saying, just to be able to see the words, just to be able to read them, you know? And because of the dyslexia, I don't store things in Hebrew. That's why you'll notice sometimes I tend to quote things in English. That's because when I learn something in Hebrew, like I'll go to Rabbi Shapiro's shir, and the whole thing will be in Hebrew. I can say it over to you verbatim in English, but I can't access the Hebrew because my brain goes the other way, you know. But a person who can't make a laning is going to be handicapped in learning for the rest of their life. It's just you reach a certain point where you just can't turn around and say, I can't make a laning. There's too much of a busha. You know? And I was amazed how many times I meet guys in yeshiva. I'll tell you a story. Maybe it's better if I don't say the name of yeshiva, but it's a very famous world-class yeshiva. And I happen to know there's a bunch of guys there who fit the description. So I offered for free to come to the yeshiva and give a shir and to teach the guys how to make a laning and the basics, etc., you know. And they told me, no, thank you. And I pressed them a little bit and they wouldn't budge. So I spoke to one of the Rebbeim, and they said, you don't understand. We can't admit that we have those guys at our yeshiva. Because if people find out that a yeshiva on our Ramah, world-class yeshiva, has guys who can't make a laning, you see, then it makes us look ridiculous. And we can't admit it. Which reminds me of the story that I heard about this fellow who had a Rolls Royce, and he was driving somewhere in rural England, and his muffler fell off. And he pulls into some service station, and they say, we don't have parts for a Rolls Royce. So they call Rolls Royce, and they say, we'll deal with it. And a short while later, they hear a helicopter. Boom, 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 and the helicopter lands, and a technician comes out with a new muffler and reattaches it, says, you know, good luck, and takes off. So the guy's thinking, wow, you know, the repair bill here is going to be tremendous. And he waits a week, 2 weeks, he doesn't see anything. So he calls up Rolls-Royce and says, listen, I'm waiting for a bill for the repair. He goes, what repair? He says, well, I was driving in Surrey or Rottington, Talkington, whatever little village it was, and my muffler fell off, and I pulled into a garage, and you sent a helicopter with a muffler and a technician, and he reattached it. He goes, I don't know what you're talking about. He says, yes, I'll tell you where it is. You're the guy's number. You can call him. He said, sir, mufflers don't fall off of Rolls Royces. I'll send a helicopter with a technician, a new part, and I won't charge him for it because otherwise I have to admit that on a Rolls Royce, a muffler fell off. So imagine you're in a world-class yeshiva and you have to admit the fact that there are guys who never learned how to make a laning. And it's very hard because it's donkey work. That's why if you do the work when you're younger, you memorize your list of vocabulary words, heicha and hacha, you know what I mean? And you go over, all the different afal pi, afal gav, all the different things and figure out how to do it and pick up enough Aramaic that you can make yourself understood, you know what I mean? And get through most. Rabbi Orlofsky said, I think there's about 100 words you need to know to get through most of Gemara. And the other words you can either figure out from the context or look at Rashi or look it up. But, there's 100 basic words you have to memorize to be able to be successful. So that's the big underlying problem that a lot of people have when it comes to learning. Because if they don't have that essential tool, they're not going to be able to move on. So what's my point? My point is you have to be honest in your evaluation. When my son was in 8th grade, so here in Israel, after you finish cheder in 8th grade, you go to Yeshiva Katana. And And we went to a meeting about Yeshiva Katanis, and the Menahel told the following story, the principal. He said there was a father who had a solid B's student, right? He was a solid B student. He wasn't an A student. But the father had protexia, right? He had connections. And he could get his son into an Aleph school, not just an Aleph school, an Aleph yeshiva. And he was going to push his son into this Aleph yeshiva. And the principal and the Rebbe said, don't do this to the boy. He can't handle it. He's a solid B student. Put him into a B school where he will be successful. And the father said, I can't tell my friends that my boy is in a B school. I have to say he's in a double A school. How am I gonna face my friends? So unfortunately, when it comes to choosing yeshivas, very often people go for status. What school is going to be good for shidduchim? What school is going to be good for my reputation? And that is, in my opinion, a terrible way to make an educational decision. But that's how it goes. We go by reputation. We go by name. You know, I heard this story. I did not confirm it. As I always point out, I'm not Pesach Kron. I don't check out my stories. But today there are a whole bunch of Brisks. Once upon a time, there was just Brisk. Yeah. Once upon a time, it wasn't a yeshiva. You know, the Brisk Rav, I think, used to give a shir around his dining room table, you know. But his son Reb Beryl took over the yeshiva and actually built the yeshiva. And then his son Rav Avram Yeshua took over. So there were a bunch of other Brisks and Brisk-like schools, etc. You know, Baruch Hashem, there's enough of the mishpacha around to open all kinds of different schools. But the main Brisk could only accommodate a limited number of bachrim, obviously. Because the whole point is to go into the shir to hear of Avram Yeshua tell over the Brisker Rav and Chaim's Torah, you know, maybe the Beis Halevi, you know, occasionally Reb Beryl, you know, and if you're not in his shir, okay, so there are a couple of shiurim that are there to get you ready for it. But for the most part, that's the purpose of the yeshiva. But Brisk had a name. It was called the Harvard of the yeshivas. Apparently it was anti-Semitic. But so this is the story I heard. A delegation of Rosh Yeshiva came to meet with Avram Yeshua and said, you are destroying learning in America. Was haste? What did I do? He says, if a boy wants to continue learning, he has to find a father-in-law who's willing to support him. And father-in-laws are only willing to support boys who went to Brisk. Waste my money on a second-rate boy. He says, so you're not taking the boys, even boys who are ready to go to Brisk. So they don't go to Brisk, so they can't get somebody to support them, and they can't stay in learning. So Avram Yeshua basically said, this is how I heard the story. Again, I don't have any edim. This is how I heard it said over. You know me. I hear something and I repeat it. He says, okay, I'll take whoever you send me. So a whole bunch of people came to Brisk, and they weren't going to get into shir for years. But at least they could say they were in Brisk. Yeah. Scarecrow, there are people with no more brains than you, but they have something you don't have, a college degree. Here's a college degree, and now you're a genius. Yeah. So now everybody could say that they learned in Brisk. This is the story I heard. Could be it's totally not true. I don't know, but I do know for a fact that suddenly Brisk started taking a lot more students, and I know from guys there that they wait many years to be able to get into shir. So the circumstantial evidence certainly supports the story. But is that the best place for your learning? Or are there other considerations? And so this is a big question that people have to ask themselves. So therefore, as everyone who knows me knows, before you can answer any question, you have to define it. Yeah, people say, I want to live a meaningful life. what is a meaningful life? People say, I want to have a good marriage. What is a good marriage? People say, I want to have good kids. What are good kids? And everything, how do you run a good Pesach Seder? First define what a good Pesach Seder is. And I want to have meaningful davening. Okay, just tell me what your goal is. What is it you're trying to accomplish? And if people don't have definitions, then they never are going to, well, I shouldn't say never, but the odds are against them accomplishing their goals because they don't know what their goal is. Or as the old expression goes, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. Someone stops you and says, can you give me directions? I'm a Long Island boy, Someone says, can you give me directions? So where you going? I said, I don't know. I said, in that case, take the Northern State Parkway instead of the LIE. It's more scenic, I don't know where you're going either. But if you're looking for a nice road, it's a nice road. Might not take you where you want to go. So that's why when we come to the essential question of choosing yeshiva, the first thing is we're going to have to be realistic and figure out what it is that I want to accomplish. So next time in Mirza Hashem, we'll go over some of the considerations that you need to take into account when choosing a yeshiva. And that brings us to the question and answer portion of our program. Dina asks, how can I make everyday activities meaningful? This is such a wonderful question. There is a girl I knew when she was in high school. She loved to learn Torah. She enjoyed it very much. In fact, in the yichud room, very often the husband gives his new wife a piece of jewelry. What she wanted was a Mishnayos Mevueres. That was her yichud room present, She loved learning. Anyway, they moved out. He became a Rav. She became a Rebbitzin. And most of her time was now involved with domestic obligations as opposed to intellectual pursuits. Well, they came to Eretz Yisrael one summer. And he was running a learning program, and she was taking classes at the advanced seminary in Neve Yerushalayim. And she comes to visit me, and she says, I'm so alive when I'm learning Torah. This is what I really want to do. And I feel like my life is nothing, Or as one Israeli woman said to me once, Ma'ani Filipino? Because that's who usually comes by to do domestic activity here in Israel. People from the Philippines go, Ma'ani Filipino? That's what I do. So I'll tell you what I told her in a second, but I'm interrupting the story for another story. I've mentioned him before, and I really need to have him on the show. And that's Dr. Mati Stern. And he's a tremendous Talmid Chacham, and he's a dentist, and he specializes in implants. One of the world leaders in implants. You can often see his ads in the Jewish publications. And he said to me once, you think I'm a dentist? I don't look at myself as a dentist. I'm a Baal Chesed. People come into my office, they haven't been able to eat an apple in years. And I give them new teeth, and for the first time in their life, they can eat an apple. And I thought, what a brilliant way of looking at things. I mean, that's how he approaches business. In fact, when he would have people in, Israelis are always looking to handle, etc. He would give them a card, and he would say, I'm not charging you. It was like one of those donation cards like they have at Yisker, It says, turn up the flap, whatever you think you can pay. He said the bottom one was 0, 100 to whatever it was. Click, fold over whatever you could pay. He says, most of the time, people ended up clicking off what I would have charged them anyway. but no one ever took 0. I said, what if they did? He says, then I would have charged them 0. If a person tells me, honestly, you did all this procedure for me and I can't afford to pay for it, okay. Because I'm looking at this not as a business, I'm looking at this as a chesed. What a brilliant insight, yeah? So what I said to her is, what did a Kohen do in the Beis HaMikdash? Housework, right? He sifted the flour and kneaded the dough and baked the bread and roasted the meat. He did housework. In fact, the Gemara Pesachim says they even did sponja. You know what I mean? Afterwards, they would stop up the stream and bring it in and have it wash out the azar. You know, they were doing sponja. It says what made it significant is they knew that they were a Kohen in the Beis HaMikdash. She said, so how do I have that kavanah when I'm looking at a sink full of dishes? And I said, why do you think a sink full of dishes has any less kedusha than washing the innards of a cow in a bucket? If you know you're in the Beis HaMikdash, Ma tovu alecha Yaakov, Mishkan asecha Yisrael. Every Jewish home is a Mishkan, and the lady of the house is the Kohen working in the Beis HaMikdash. And I've met women who say, I look at what I'm doing as I'm supporting my family. Yeah, I'm giving them food, I'm giving them clothing, I'm giving them, I'm providing for them like HaKadosh Baruch Hu provides for us. That's my job here, is to be able to give a chesed, to be able to make my house into a home and my family to have their needs taken care of. When you look at it from that point of view, everything that you do in this world, if it's worthwhile, can be filled with meaning. Now, as the expression goes, something not worth doing is not worth doing well. If you're asking me, how do you find meaning in playing Candy Crush? I have no solution for you. Yeah. If you tell me, I'm doing something that's worthless, I always share the quote from Minnesota Fats, who was considered by many people to be the world's greatest billiard player. The film The Hustler was based on him. Jackie Gleason played him. And he had a quote that's just gewaldic. He says, now I'm a pool player. There's probably nothing in this world less important than a pool player. But for the record books, let it be noted, I'm the best. So if you're doing something meaningless and you want to know how to make that meaningless, I don't know. But if you're doing something like you're eating lunch and you understand I'm doing this to have the koyach to be able to do what I need to do, or I'm taking a nap so that I have the strength to go on and do whatever else I need to do, that inherently makes it something more worthwhile. Okay, next question by Anonymous. Why do we not talk about Mashiach at all in the Litvish world? We simply throw it in only as a way to end speeches. And so, Amir Hashem, we should be Zoich to have Mashiach. Why are we leaving Mashiach to be discussed only by Chabad? So, of course, Mashiach is an underlying important concept. But the question should be much broader than that. I asked Rav Moshe Shapiro at one point, I said, I've heard people say that the Musar movement is dead. And he says, yes. Yes, he agreed. Which means, how come people go to yeshiva and they don't learn anything about Midos or Derech Eretz? Or as the Mesilas Yesharim says, and he wrote this 300 years ago, there are 5 areas of Avodas Hashem that's listed in order to become a complete Jew. And we only deal with one of them, keeping mitzvahs. He says, what about Avas Hashem, Yiras Hashem, Kavanas Halev? Yeah, what about all of these other things? How come we don't put any emphasis on this? How come in yeshivas we don't teach people how to daven? I'm not talking about the halachas. I'm saying what they're saying, how to make the tefillah meaningful in their lives. People spend so much time in yeshivas davening, and they have no idea what they're saying. And it doesn't become meaningful to them on any level. How come we don't teach basic hashkafa And you see there are certain organizations and certain individuals who go around the yeshivas to answer basic questions on Yiddishkeit. You know, when I became frum at the age of 12, and I had to answer all kinds of different questions, I was being attacked constantly, I found that when I came into Yeshiva Gedola, I knew more hashkafa than any other guy in the yeshiva, because nobody teaches this. They don't know what it means to be a Yid. Nobody understands what the basic Torah hashkafas are. So I think it's a mistake to say, why aren't they teaching about Mashiach? Why aren't they focusing on Mashiach? Why aren't they focusing on Midos? Why aren't they focusing on Musa? Why aren't they focusing on Hashkafa? Why aren't they focusing on anything other than Halacha and Gemara? That's the real question. And the answer is because there was a time when this was part and parcel of being a Jew. You didn't have to teach about a Kodesh Baruch Hu and your relation with a Kodesh Baruch Hu because everyone lived with it. You know, lahavdil to bring it in, but like, you know, in the story Tevye the milkman that they based Fiddler on the Roof on, he's always talking to Kodesh Baruch Hu. Yidden in Europe always spoke to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He was a part of their life. You don't have to teach people how to daven or relate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Everybody did it. You don't have to talk about Mashiach. Everybody lived with a sense of Mashiach. You know, the Chavetz Chaim had a suitcase packed, ready to go there. So Mashiach came. You know, it was part and parcel of who we were as a people. And now so many things that were so fundamental to being a Jew have been lost. I say this story over all the time from Rabbi Kaufman. I heard him say it once on a Tisha B'Av. He said, my parents may not have been as mitzvah observant as many Jews are today, but they were proud Jews. And you find a lot of Jews who are mitzvah observant who aren't proud Jews. They're goyim who keep mitzvahs, but their hashkaf is a goyim, and their approach is goyim, and the way they talk is goyish. And you know, one of the examples I always bring is drinking in the frum community. A goy bista shika. You never found Jews who drink, and now you have a problem of you go to simchas and there's just tables and tables of booze, and people get themselves drunk. You never saw this before, because we're losing that gefühl of what it means to be a Yid. So I think the main reason is that it's not, why aren't we talking about Mashiach? Why aren't we talking about anything else? And why is everything being lost in the process? I think another reason is that we have always been uncomfortable with messianic movements. They've always proven to be problematic in Jewish history. Going back to Yoshka, you know, Shabtai Tzvi, you know, Frank, all these would-be messiahs throughout history have caused a lot of problems, and that might be one of the reasons why we don't talk about it as much, only because people are nervous about that idea. Whereas in Chabad, since they hold that the Rebbe was Mashiach, then of course they're going to speak a lot more about Mashiach, because that's their Rebbe's mission. They hold that he is Mashiach. And therefore, they will, some places, not every place, add in Adonenu Morenu Rabbeinu Melech HaMashiach, you know, that they're adding it in because that's part of it. And it could be that in the yeshiva world, it's a sort of counter reaction to that. Okay, well, that's it for this episode. If you want to find out more about the show, you can go to my website, RabbiOrlofsky.com. I'm planning to be in America at the beginning of July. If anybody's interested in, booking an event, I am available. And if you want to sign up for one of the online shiurim, if you want to sponsor an episode, if you want to sponsor question and answer, and you want to submit a question, you want to send an email, all of those things you can do and more. And that's it for now. So until next time, I am David Orlofsky, and this has been the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode, and we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah, anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.